Welcome back to this final segment of this very special edition on the Taiwan Outlook on U.S.-Taiwan and cross-strait relations. I'm your host, Wu Ruiguo. I'll start off with Alan for this segment on the issue of President Obama's visit to China, and also in the subsequent U.S.-China joint statement. There was a phrase in it that the United States welcomes cross-strait interactions and exchanges in, quote, economic, political, and other areas, end quote. Does that mean Washington is thinking of, maybe playing the role of encouraging or facilitating, interactions and exchanges even in the political domain?
My response to that is the U.S. does not have an interest in pushing this kind of thing, but there's been a lot of suspicion voiced both in Taiwan and in the mainland that the U.S. has objections to the kind of dialogues which have gone on already and the deals and potentially others, including in the area of political dialogue or even in the area of a peace accord. I think that the point here is to say the United States is not have a principled objection to these things. This is up to the two sides. But we want to make clear, as Americans, this is not something we're seeking to obstruct. So that's really up to the two sides to figure out what they feel is in their interest to do.
I think the view within Taiwan is that given the fact that we have a long-standing, very substantive relations with Washington, it is almost inconceivable for some of us in Taiwan to think that the United States will have no role to play. The United States will be happy being a passive bystander as the two sides, Beijing and Taipei, engage and continue with political talks.
I think the United States would want to be fully informed.
Ahead or before, after?
In the course of the process. Sort of like people talk about the role of the LY, right? And be able to express its views. But at the end of the day, these decisions are going to be made by the governments on both sides, not by the United States. And I don't think the U.S. is going to seek to impose its view on this process. I'd like to go back for 1 second, if I might, to this question of political dialogue, though, because I think that Bi-khim raised a very important issue when she raised the question of definitions. What are we talking about? I'm not convinced that what Zheng Bijian and the others who came here to that conference talked about necessarily reflects what everybody else is talking about. And besides, they were different. Among themselves, there were differing views. I don't know where they're going to go with this. A lot of, in the United States, the specialists on these issues have a lot of discussions about, well, will the 92 consensus be a good enough basis for moving ahead? Because it is, in a sense, a one-China approach, but it's not a united one-China approach across the strait. And I think in the PRC there are differences of view about whether it's enough or not enough. We don't know the answer to that question. And as Steve pointed out, this is not going to be done by one person, one vote in the mainland. This is going to be a leadership decision. My view is if they want to make progress with Taiwan, they're going to accept the 92 consensus as a good enough basis and not try and push Taiwan to the wall on accepting more explicit definitions of one China and so on and so forth.
You don't think so?
If they want to insist on that, then they will fail.
Good. Professor Zhao Chien-Min, I'm going to ask you then, looking ahead to the year of the Tiger, 2010, what would be the areas or possible variables that would negatively impact cross-strait relations, given the fact that there's been a lot of attention focused on possibly signing ECFA in the first half of the year? Any other variables that you foresee?
Well, domestic concerns is always an element, a very important element. Last year we had important local elections with implications for cross-strait relations, and this year we look forward to another important, even more important local elections on the horizon. Beyond that, of course, we like to forge more consensus between the ruling party, KMT, and the opposition, DPP, with regard to our current relations with Mainland China.
Of course.
We like the public, the general public, to be more informed about what we'll be doing with regard to this ECFA thing and how important it is to our economic welfare in the future and so on. But looking back 1 year from now, I would say, I would hope we can conclude that we have another good year, and with cross-strait is in more peace, in a state of more peace and stability, and the economic well-being of the Taiwanese people have been further promoted, and so on.
Okay. And Bi-khim, I think a lot of people in Taiwan would like to see a better relations, between the opposition and the government. And Chairwoman Tsai Ing-wen also mentioned earlier that she's willing to engage in policy dialogue with the government. Do you anticipate that position would lead to some concrete progress in that area?
Well, first of all, both Dr. Tsai Ing-wen and President Ma have on separate occasions expressed a willingness to debate the issue of ECFA. And I think if this debate can indeed take place, of course, with more information and content about what ECFA is all about, I think it would be good for Taiwan's public to take part in the process and to understand better the pros and cons and our concerns about ECFA. I have to say that, though, the past signing of the various agreements took place in a way that was not very open to the public in advance, including the signing of the financial MOU. It wasn't given to the LY until 3 weeks after the actual signing of the agreement. Okay. That was 22 days after the signing of the agreement. But as we continue to demand greater transparency and more communication, if the government is able to respond to that with a public debate, such as a debate on ECFA, or more communication with the private sector, such as in the most recent Jiangchen talks, the issue of the tax agreement was postponed, and apparently out of a lot of pressure from the Taiwanese business people. Apparently they do have a stake. There's a tremendous interest involved in that, and so more prior dialogue with the private sector, with the private community within Taiwan, and with the opposition party, with the legislature, would certainly be more helpful in forging consensus within Taiwan.
Well, if I may,
please.
I'm kind of dumbfounded by the opposition keeps saying no transparency and so on when we signed the agreements with Mainland China. Take the fourth round of talks between the two sides, which was concluded a few days ago. We gave 18 press conferences in order to explain to the public what the talks were about between the minister at the Mainland Affairs Council and the deputy ministers. We gave 40 interviews to promote the talks, not to mention tremendous amount of ads, advertisements, and so on. I don't think that the lack of transparency was a good description.
Well, I think that just for our program today, I think the two sides, government and also opposition representative, are talking, discussing those issues. I think that's a very good start. Certainly, I think the viewing public would like to see more of it in the year of 2010. Alan, do you foresee that the current direction of U.S.-Taiwan relations and also the trilateral relations with China, between U.S., China, and Taiwan, will continue in a very predictable and smooth manner for the year 2010?
Well, I certainly think that U.S. relations with Taipei on the one hand and Beijing on the other hand will continue to be pursued as vigorously as possible in terms of positive relations. There are going to be issues in terms of the triangular part of it, arms sales. The U.S., in my view, will make arms sales, and Beijing won't like it. But that's a fundamental aspect of American policy in the region, and I'm willing to argue and have to my PRC friends, and so are my government colleagues, by the way, that arms sales are actually in the PRC's interest. But that's a complicated and convoluted argument. I don't know if we run into trouble on issues such as international space. It depends what the issues are. If we find that there's a lot of pressure being exerted as we go forward on political dialogue, I'm not sure how that will play particularly. I don't think the U.S. is supportive of putting pressure on these questions. But I think that it's the U.S. is not looking at everything in a triangular context, but looking also how we can keep relations moving ahead with both sides.
All right. Finally, I'm going to ask a question for all of you. If you were asked, to give a one-phrase response to cross-strait relations at the end of 2010, a year from now? Okay, and what would it be? I'm going to start off with Steve. One phrase response.
Reaching a difficult stage.
Okay. Alan?
It's going to be a multi-part, one phrase. Economic progress, political uncertainty, continued security, reduced tensions.
Okay.
And I would say concern on the international space front.
Okay, good. And Bi-khim?
China can't be trusted, and we must proceed cautiously.
Okay. And Professor Chao?
More peace, more prosperity, and more consolidation for Taiwan sovereignty.
Okay, good. I certainly benefited a lot today, personally on our program for the past, 2 hours regarding these very important issues in U.S.-Taiwan and cross-strait relations. And certainly in the future on Taiwan Outlook, we will continue to produce programs like the ones we've seen today and last week regarding these very important issues, especially given the fact that this is the year of the ECFA, and the two sides, especially in the economic domain, will enter into a new stage, a new era in terms of how we relate and interact with each other. I want to again thank our special guests, today on the program, both in Taiwan and also from the United States. And certainly want to thank our viewers at home or wherever you are for watching our program. I'll see you next time on Microview Television. Happy New Year.